Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program, Tracy Rosser, who is EVP of Operations at Transplace. And before that, he was the Senior Vice President of Transportation and Supply Chain at Walmart, where for more than 2 decades, he kind of had a frontline view of all of the exciting changes that were taking place in the retail industry and continue to transform the industry today. How have those changes redefined the rules for success? What's top of mind for shippers today in the industry? And, what role and what impact will technology have moving forward in this industry, and which technology is going to make a difference? Well, those are some of the questions we're going to explore in today's episode. And it's great to have Tracy with us to kind of share his insights and advice on these topics and more. So, Tracy, welcome to the program.
Hey, great to be here, Adrian, and really appreciate the opportunity.
So Tracy, before we kind of dive into the industry trends and a little bit about kind of what's happening in retail and supply chain logistics and your role there, I'm always curious about how people get involved in this industry to begin with, right? So tell us a little bit about your career path. I mean, I know you spent 22 years at Walmart. Most recently, like I said, as Senior Vice President of Transportation Supply Chain. But how'd you get started in the industry? I mean, was it by plan or was it by accident?
Well, I guess you could say it was by good fortune and a little bit by accident. So when I was I did my undergrad work at University of Alabama, and I had a finance professor that asked the class who was interviewing with transportation-related companies that were coming to campus to actually conduct interviews. And nobody raised their hand. Not a single person in the entire class raised their hand. Now, this is back in, I'm going to date myself, back in the, mid to late 80s. And so he made a statement. He said, there's always going to be a need to move something from A to B. And so I thought, well, I don't have a lot of competition because nobody's raising their hand, and he's right that there's always going to be a need to move something from A to B. So I started interviewing with some of the transportation companies and actually took a job with Pool Truck Line, who was out of Evergreen, Alabama, and it was kind of post-deregulation, right? And you had a variety of truckload carriers who were kind of all about the same size. Most of the people who are quite large today were all in the 1,500 truck range back in that day. And so Pool Truck Line was a 1,000+ truck van and flatbed carrier out of South Alabama that was owned by Landstar at the time, and then later Schneider actually acquired Pool. So that's how I got started. So you could say it was a little bit of good fortune and some insight from a really wise professor.
Well, that's great. And of course, you have fast forward to today, and now you've got a lot of universities that have supply chain logistics programs, so people are actually majoring in this field and getting in that way. And I think a lot of the folks that are kind of our age and a little bit older, they get into it either by accident or by good fortune. My own background's in engineering. I started out in manufacturing, which you can argue, or it is part of the broader supply chain. I just didn't know it was then. But it's certainly an exciting, field to be in. And, certainly then you spent, obviously 22 years there at Walmart, and then now most recently, at Transplace. What's your role there at Transplace now?
So my current role at Transplace is Executive Vice President of Operations. Primary focus is on the transportation management business, which is kind of the cornerstone of Transplace. So I've got responsibility for that business segment.
Great. So, a lot has changed in the supply chain logistics industry over the past 2 decades since you started there at, coming out of college in that business, and especially in the retail industry. I mean, from your perspective, what have been some of the biggest changes that have taken place, and how have they redefined the rules for success?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's been interesting. So I'll think back even prior to my time at Walmart relative to kind of views on the supply chain. But, I'd spent 9 years in the truckload transportation business, dry van, flatbed, temp control. So got a pretty good understanding of a lot of different industries that we were doing business with, or that I was doing business with over those years, and then got into the retail supply chain. And I think about what's changed if you go back 2 decades. So let's go back to 1999, 2000, and in some ways it doesn't sound like a long time ago, but if you think about it, there was no iPhone, right? There was no mobile technology, so to speak, and the internet had not really taken off, and it was being talked about. But I think the biggest change that I've seen is in customer behavior and customer expectations over that time frame. When I think about what customers were willing to accept and what their desires were, are nowhere near what they are today, and it's shaped by, I think, intense growth and technology and capabilities that they have today, and access to information that they didn't have years ago. And so consequently, what that's done is it's caused competitors to change and competitors to fall out and competitors to grow as they respond to those customer expectations and respond to technology that's available today. So I think customer expectations are probably the biggest change, driven by technology, Adrian. So that can dovetail into a whole variety of topics in conversation.
No, absolutely. I mean, we've done some research here where, what we're seeing more and more of companies talk about is, when we talk about particularly transportation, I mean, cost is always something that's top of mind for shippers and those involved in transportation. But generally speaking, I mean, I think if you went back certainly 20 years ago, but even 10 years ago, and you talk to any transportation professional, cost was always top of mind. Even last year, obviously with the capacity crunch and everything else, a lot of transportation budgets got blown out of the water. But I think what I've seen as well, to your point, is that it's not just about cost anymore. A lot of companies and even supply chain transportation people are talking about the need to compete on customer experience. And that's what's really driving a lot of the strategies. And of course, that's trickling down to transportation strategies and distribution strategies, right? So we're now seeing, stores become fulfillment centers. We're seeing, the use of greater private fleets or these new startups to do home delivery. So, I mean, are you seeing that as well, where, this push towards the customer experience and customer expectations changing, the changes that's then driving along, let's say, transportation?
Oh, absolutely. And I think customers' expectations around a couple of things that, customers' time is worth as much as many customers' money, and time is money for customers. And so when a customer wants a particular item, whether they're going and visiting a brick and mortar operation or they're getting online, they're looking for whatever convenience is relative to their definition of convenience at that particular time. So I think, thinking back 2 decades, Walmart was changing the business model of convenience relative to one-stop shopping across an assortment of 100,000 plus SKUs at a particular super center, and combining food with general merchandise. And I remember people thinking about that, going, wow, who wants to go buy their groceries where they buy their general merchandise, And now it's quite commonplace, but the solve was for one-stop shopping and convenience of time. And now, customers have different, they have different mechanisms or alternatives to shop that provide convenience for them. And it may be, I don't want to invest in going out and buying an individual item and invest that time. So it's easier for them. Now they've got, all the power in the world at their fingertips, and they need immediacy or want immediacy, and they've got an assortment of millions and millions of SKUs at their fingertips, but they need execution. They need reliability that meets their expectations. So whether it's a single item or a basket of items, and whatever a customer is defining as their need of convenience at the time. So I think the supply chain in total, not just transportation, you've got to view. And what I've learned is transportation is a component of an end-to-end supply chain, and everything has to work in harmony, from manufacturing all the way to in use in the return network. Adrian, that now the view to serve a customer has to be holistic and not in silos. So if you're going to operate in the transportation space and be really, really great at it, you got to understand end-to-end supply chain today to serve a customer.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, obviously, over the past few years, a lot of discussion around e-commerce, right? And I think even early on in the early days of e-commerce, there was a lot of discussion about, to your point, almost talking about silos. I think a lot of folks were saying, hey, e-commerce is going to completely, do away with brick and mortar, retail. And then certainly there's been a lot of brick and mortars that have gone by the wayside. But I think if you peel back the onion, it's for a variety of different reasons, not just e-commerce. But I think if you look today, it's a very different perspective, right? Because now actually those assets, those stores are viewed as a strength and a competitive differentiator. And what we're seeing is really, to your point, it's not just e-commerce, it's not just brick and mortar. It's how do you leverage, all of these assets and all these capabilities in a differentiating way, focused on the customer, but also, driving that reliability, that quality, that service component. So I think that's another interesting piece of it is that, hey, it's not been the death of brick and mortar, because now you have, Walmart's a great example. Order online and you can go and pick up at the store, and now you have these very fancy machines, I guess you can call them, or things within the store where a consumer can go in and just put in their barcode, and out pops the thing that they ordered the night before or 2 days ago, which I think is kind of unique and kind of leveraging this kind of broader. The broader pieces of the puzzle, bringing them all together.
Yeah, Adrian, it's a great point. I'll tell you, you had asked the question earlier, is it more than just cost today? So it's absolutely execution based on how the customer wants to be served. And so you got to be really good at that. But then also cost does matter. So running an efficient supply chain, having the information, the data to understand what's happening in your business, because cost does matter in terms of where the customer is going to go. Plus, they have a lot of cost transparency with access to information. But the other thing that's interesting that you were touching on, that's becoming a bigger part of the conversation with customers today, and I had this conversation with one of our customers, Transplace customer, just last week, and then the conversation came up at my house as well this past week, is how do you run a really sustainable supply chain? People care a lot about sustainability. Our customers care a lot about it. And so how do you run a very efficient supply chain also that's great for the environment? And that comes into play again, both with our direct customer engagements that care a lot about it, as well as the e-commerce space, looking at shipments from one location, how much packaging is being utilized, how do you minimize all those types of things and be a good steward of the environment while you're executing and serving a customer base. So I think there's a multitude of things that matter today that people are thinking about that they didn't think about 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's the same thing in our household as well. My oldest daughter, who's going to be a sophomore in college, I would say she's the one that's driving, the sustainability conversation within our household, right? So it's the next generation that, every generation has something that's a little bit different in terms of their expectations of what they're looking for, whether it's, there's a lot of conversation today in grocery retail, right, about more organic, fresh food, so forth. That's transforming what's happening with the packaged food industry. But then sustainability is something that certainly for the younger generations is something that they've, have a pulse on, and there's something that's very important for them as well. So again, it goes back to just, keeping pace with, the changing customer expectations, and then how that trickles down to supply chain logistics operations. Tracy, I'm going to shift gears a little bit here because, I think let's talk now a little bit about kind of shipper 3PL, relationships. And obviously for a lot of companies, they rely on their logistics service provider partners to help them achieve, their objectives and their strategies and to drive innovation within their supply chains. So you've been on the shipper side for a long time. Now you're on the logistics service provider side again. Based on your past and your current experience, what does it take to create a successful 3PL customer relationship? What do shippers look for in a 3PL and vice versa? What do 3PLs look for in a customer?
Yeah, good question, and really relevant given kind of the timing that I'm at right now, Adrian. I think what shippers need and require out of a 3PL is a 3PL that's going to have what I would call a very deep and intimate understanding of their customer's business. If you're going to entrust someone else to execute on your behalf, You want to make sure, and what I used to look for is somebody that really took the time not to just come in and understand what did I have that would complement their business, but I really needed them to understand what, as a shipper, what my mission was, what my purpose was, what my strategies were, whether they were customer service strategies, whether they were saving strategies, whether, what we're trying to accomplish, and really get a deep understanding of it, how we did business, what our culture was like. All those things mattered a lot. And so to be a 3PL, and I think be a successful 3PL, you really got to figure out how you integrate into the business, and make it transparent to the customer that they're actually dealing with the 3PL. And see that 3PL as a part of an extension of their supply chain organization. So I think that's the type of relationship that shippers are searching for. That ownership and accountability and responsibility is what shippers need. And then I think the other thing that I always thought about as a shipper in thinking about a 3PL, Adrian, is then how do you do more than just execute? How do you bring me value? And so a 3PL has a unique opportunity based on their position relative to that shipper, that if they're doing a great job serving them and executing, they should also have tremendous access to data and insights that can actually help that shipper improve and find value and create value, find where the waste is, help that shipper find where the waste is in their network, and really work hard to eliminate and add value from that standpoint. So that's kind of what I think about from what a shipper is looking for from a 3PL. I'll pause there and just see if you have any questions about that, and then I can touch on maybe what a 3PL is looking for in a shipper.
Yeah, no, I think that those are all great points. I mean, one of the things that I think when I've done research in this area, a couple of things pop up. One is one of the things that I've seen as a common denominator of successful 3PL customer relationship is when there's an alignment of culture, company cultures, right? So if a shipper has for example, a culture that's rooted in continuous improvement, let's say Lean Six Sigma, and the 3PL also has a culture of Lean Six Sigma, continuous improvement, at the very beginning, you already have that foundation and alignment that helps to build a relationship. So I was kind of curious if that's something you see as well as it being important, kind of alignment, of culture. And I think secondly, I hear this more from the 3PLs, is that say, those customers that view us as a partner instead of a vendor or a supplier are the ones that, again, approach that relationship already from the get-go, from a more of a strategic, a more positive standpoint than someone that's just going to send us an RFP and we're one of 10 or 15 people that's sending RFPs to, and we feel more like being in a vendor pool versus someone that's looking for a partner. So anyway, your thoughts on those two things?
Yeah, I think the alignment, cultural alignment, as you articulated, is exactly right. And I think that's just one of those things that just causes a platform for the latter that you mentioned, and that's a strategic partnership. You can be transactional, but transactional, I think, yields short-term results. And if you're looking to really transform your business, those strategic relationships, I think, tend to work the best for both parties, because the investments are going to be made on both sides. The transparency of information and data that's necessary for a world of continuous improvement, I think lends itself best if there's that strategic long-term relationship. So I would wholeheartedly agree with you, Adrian, that's what the 3PLs are looking for, from a shipper standpoint.
Great. So, I mean, you mentioned you had a conversation with a client recently, and then sustainability came up, and that's something that's rising to the surface. So, obviously in your current role, you have the opportunity to speak to many, leading shippers out there and customers as well as prospects. I mean, what is top of mind, for them today? I mean, what are some of the challenges or opportunities that, they're facing or going after?
Yeah, Adrian, it's again great that you asked this. So as you know, I've only been with Transplace just a handful of weeks, not even yet a handful of weeks. And my first mission is obviously to get to know our people at Transplace and then get to know our customers. And so I've been out the last 3 weeks doing nothing but talking to customers. And so what I'm hearing as a common thread is, execution is a given. It's like it's not even on the table. It's a given. You have to execute what customers have is in terms of their expectations. But what I'm hearing that customers are really looking for, and this goes, it doesn't matter. I've spoken with CPG customers, chemical customers, manufacturers. What they are looking for is, hey, there's a lot of data that exists out there in the marketplace, and our mission, one of the things that we're really focused on, as you said, is continuous improvement. And what they're looking for is, how do you bring insights, actionable insights, that go beyond just the raw data, that help us improve our business operations, help us better serve our customers. And so that's what they're looking for. Also, they're looking for, and I think this goes back to kind of a recency effect of 2018, which was kind of a phenomenon in the transportation world, is, we want to be the experts in the transportation area, but we want to help them see around the corners, so that they can really focus on the core of their business. So we want to be the transportation experts for them, supply chain experts for them, and help guide them as to what they need to be thinking about relative to their supply chain and their business. But that's really what I'm hearing as a common thread across everybody that I'm speaking with.
That resonates with me. Like I said, some of the research I've done in the past when I've talked to shippers in terms of what do they look for in their logistics service provider partners, one of the things they put it more, I get more bluntly, and said, hey, tell us something we don't already know, right?
Right.
That's what they're looking for, right? So I think you're right. Execution is it's table stakes, right? If you can't execute, you're not going to be in business very long, right? So if you've been in business for as long as Transplace has been in business, and some of your peers in the industry, you got to be able to execute to stay in business, right? So then how do you differentiate, as a 3PL in the eyes of shippers? And I think that's becoming the differentiating piece. How can you bring your people to the forefront, your expertise to the forefront, to, provide them with the insights, with the data, with the information, to tell them something they don't already know, so that they can either improve their operations or create a differentiator or so forth. And I think a big part of that, or part of that today, which brings me to my next question, is technology, right? So you talked about there's a lot of data out there, but being able to analyze that and kind of be able to bring out insights and actionable information out of that is where a lot of companies struggle or have challenges with, either because they don't have the technology, or they don't have the data scientists or the in-house expertise to do that. So that's what they look for in a logistics service provider. So, when it comes to technology, obviously it's going to continue to play an important role in supply chain logistics for both shippers and LSPs. And certainly that's an area that, I know Transplace has been investing in a lot recently. I mean, what advancements do you see, having the most impact in the industry over the next few years?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Adrian. So again, just bouncing back to what you just said, the thing that excites me about Transplace, and a big reason I came here, is I think that Transplace is really uniquely designed from a capability standpoint, a resource standpoint, to be that problem solver and that engagement mechanism for customers that are looking for value. So that's what we're very much designed for. And so going back to your question, what is it that I see in terms of technology in the future? And I just want to make sure that that's the question that you're asking, is where do I see technology going that's really important? It's technology that we're investing in right now and capabilities that Transplace has and or is investing in, and that is capabilities around the resources around network analysis, engineering, network engineering, how to, one of the beautiful things about Transplace is we've got a tremendous amount of scale that I had no idea Transplace had. I mean, we have billions and billions of dollars of freight under management across multiple modes. With that comes a tremendous amount of data, and with that becomes a tremendous amount of insights to be had and efficiencies to be found. So applying artificial intelligence in machine learning to that data to improve our customers' business and find those operating efficiencies is really, really critical. And so that's where you see us investing. You see us investing in the transportation management software that we have, implementation of control tower, business intelligence, so that we can help customers with continuous improvement. When you talk about things like AI and machine learning, looking at how we can utilize those types of technologies for things like direct continuous move programs, that is really, really, really hard to do. It sounds easy, but I've not ever seen it executed well. And I can tell you by implementing the technology, Adrian, we're actually getting it done, and getting it done across multiple customer bases. And then the other thing that's really interesting, that's evolving, and I say it's evolving, is really getting into predictive analytics in a much bigger way, understanding how you can incorporate the Internet of Things with AI and ML to get into risk mitigation, risk identification, and risk mitigation to ensure appropriate execution. So those are some of the types of things that are rapidly evolving right now. And I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think you brought up a great point in terms of having the scale, because I mean, when we talk about technologies like machine learning, for example, I mean, they're really dependent on having, large amounts of data to really work off of in order to drive and derive those insights. And of course, one of my, soapbox issues for decades now has been, machine learning is not going to provide much value if the underlying data is crappy data, right? So, this focus on, data quality and managing that has to be part of the equation in order for, to really get value out of machine learning, AI, predictive analytics, all these things. And I think that needs to become a focus, moving forward, for whether you're a shipper, whether you're 3PL, everyone in the ecosystem is, really focusing on data quality. Obviously a lot of it is improved by some of the IoT and some of the automation in capturing data, but then you also have to run the risk of, drowning in too much data, right? So, right. So I think there's a lot going on with data, the underlying food, if you will, that feeds ML and artificial intelligence that I think can't be overlooked, because I think if you overlook that and just focus on the sexy algorithms, you're not going to get the full benefits out of the, some of these technologies. But again, I think, with companies such as yourselves and others that have been around in the industry for a long time, that have large ecosystems, you've got the benefit of having that large base of data to work off, which is great. Tracy, we're running short on time here, so I'm just going to go to my last question here, which is kind of shifting gears a little bit here. But a lot of the folks that I talk to at conferences, and I know a lot of the folks that watch Talking Logistics are young professionals and students that are just getting into the industry. So I always love to get kind of advice from folks that are very experienced in this industry, and particularly yourself, who's been now on both sides of both the shipper side and the 3PL side. I mean, what advice would you give to students and young professionals entering the industry today? I mean, what skills or experiences should they acquire to become kind of successful leaders of tomorrow?
Yeah, great question, because people are the greatest assets, right? You've got to have people to do all the things that we've talked about, and you got to have great people. I think about, if I was giving advice, I would say seriously look at supply chain as a career path. Again, there's always going to be a need to move something from A to B. and the world's getting smaller and it's getting more complex. And with that, I think, I made a couple of notes relative to this. You need people who can have the skill sets to understand, I would call it an empathetic skill set, to have the ability to understand your customers' perspectives and your customers' perspectives and needs. I think understanding operations is really critical, and having that as a ground set. So being able to kind of get your hands dirty and get in the operations of the business, I think is really, really important. And then understanding the financial aspects and kind of financial drivers of your customer's business and then your own business. And then I think about communication skills, influence skills, analytical skills. Those are things that are very important, that people would want to hone in on and have the ability to enhance thinking about this. And then I think about being a lifelong learner. Know that when you get into this business, that it is not a static environment. Things change rapidly. And so come into this business with the mindset, and it's really, I think, why people get into this business and it sticks. It's ever changing, and you have to be a lifelong learner around things like technology and business processes and whatnot, and then learn about your customers' businesses as well. And then finally, it's a great industry to be innovative. And so I think you have to have an innovative mindset to be successful in the future. So, people that are thinking about this business and entering into this industry today for tomorrow, the skill sets are dramatically different than when I entered into it several years ago. But it's exciting, and it's going to do nothing but become more and more important as things change in the world.
Well, great insights and advice there, Tracy, and I wholeheartedly agree. I'm trying to get my kids who are, in high school and moving into college to try to think about this industry. I haven't quite convinced them yet, but I'm working on it because, absolutely, there's a ton of opportunities here. And I remember I go back to a quote from a young professional from a few years ago. She was presented with an award at one of the conferences, and someone asked her, why did you decide to study, supply chain logistics? She said, I want to be in an industry where I knew that every day when I showed up to work, it was going to be a different day, and she thrived on that. And the fact that, yes, sometimes, it's challenging and frustrating, but it's also innovative. It's exciting. A lot of new things happening all the time. And that was what she was looking for. And I think that's what a lot of, folks want out of their career, right? They want something that is going to continuously challenge them in positive ways. And certainly this is an industry that promises that. Tracy, like I always say at the end of all our programs, we always just manage to scratch the surface on these topics that we talk about. We certainly covered a lot of different ground today in our conversation, but I want to thank you again for making the time to be with us.
Yeah, thank you for the time and the opportunity as well, Adrian. Look forward to talking with you in the future.
Great. And I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand at the Transplace website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Tracy, you can post it there, and I'm sure he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.